Hello, this is Shannon with Dogwood Crochet, and today I'm going to show you how to make this Christmas wreath ornament. I love these wreath ornaments because they work up very quickly. They're great for stash busting or using up any extra yarn that you want to get rid of, and they also make great gifts. So they're definitely fun to make, and you can make a lot of them very quickly. So either last minute gifts, or if you're just looking for another way to fill up your tree some more, these are a great option. So the materials you're going to need are a 5.5 millimeter crochet hook, and then some medium weight number 4 worsted yarn. This is Mary Maxim's Starlit Sparkle, and this color is Emerald. And then you're going to need just a tiny bit of red for the bow, and then a tiny bit of twine or some other string if you prefer to hang it from your tree, and then of course some scissors to cut everything. And then you'll also need 1 hair elastic. So I'm using one of the thinner hair elastics, but you could choose to use a thicker one, or you could also use a wooden ring. But basically you just want something that's going to provide that circular shape to start out your wreath. So to start out, I'm just going to get my yarn and tie a knot onto the hair elastic. So just making sure that it's secure on there. Then I'm going to get my crochet hook, and I'm going to place my hook through the middle of the hair elastic and yarn over and pull up a loop of my yarn. Then I'm going to chain 1. So what we're going to do all the way around is we're just going to single crochet around this hair elastic until it's completely covered. So another trick that I like to do so that I don't have to weave in my ends later is I like to take this end and just hold it flush against the hair tie so that it's underneath the stitches as I'm working them. So to do our single crochet, we're just going to insert our hook through the center of the hair elastic, yarn over, pull up a loop, then we'll have 2 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through both loops. And so we just continue this all the way around until we have covered the entire hair elastic. So like I said, I think for me it takes about 29 to 30 single crochets to cover the hair elastic. You don't want to do too many or too few. If you do too few, then you'll be able to see the hair elastic through the wreath, and if you do too many, it's going to kind of end up like a scrunchie. You might see your wreath kind of bending in a weird way or bunching up. So 30 is kind of that sweet spot so that the hair elastic is covered, but it's still going to lay flat like a wreath. So I'm just going to continue this all the way around. And if you want to, once you've done enough to kind of cover up this end, you can just choose to leave it out and then snip it off if you don't want to continue working all the way until it's tucked in. So I'm just going to continue single crocheting around until I get to where I started. Okay, so I'm at 25 stitches now, and you can see I'm almost all the way around, but here it looks like there's a little bit of a gap, so I'm just going to slide these stitches over along my hair elastic just to make a little more room for the remaining 4 or 5 stitches. So this is exactly 29 now, and I'm thinking I'm pretty happy with this. You can tell, it looks like our hair tie is completely covered. You can't see any of the black elastic, and it's still laying flat. So I'm going to end my first round here, and then we're going to slip stitch to this first stitch of the round. So you don't need a stitch marker. You could use one if you want, but basically you're going to work until you've reached the first part where you secured your yarn onto the hair elastic. So we just slip stitched. So now we are done with round 1. So for round 2, we're going to do a zigzag stitch, which means it's a combination of a chain 1 and a slip stitch, all in the same stitch. So to start out, we're going to chain 1, and then we're going to work into the same stitch here that we just slip stitched into. So if you can see here, this is our second stitch, and this is that first stitch that we just worked into. So we're going to slip stitch into that again. And then we're going to chain 1 and slip stitch into the next stitch. And just continue this all the way around. So chain 1 and slip stitch into the next stitch. So you'll have 1 chain 1 and 1 slip stitch for each stitch from round 1. And we just do this all the way until we've gotten to where we started. So I'm just going to continue doing this, and then when I get to the end, I'll come back. All right, so I'm coming up on the end here. I can tell that I started my zigzag stitches here. You can tell because it's a little bit taller, but once again, if you want to use a stitch marker, you can do that. Just going to work into these last few stitches. And then we're not going to slip stitch into this here. This is that slip stitch from our first round. So we're just going to slip stitch into the first chain 1 space from round 2. And it doesn't really matter how you finish this off as long as you slip stitch to something. I like to slip stitch into this chain 1 space, but you know, if you wanted to slip stitch to that slip stitch from the previous round here, if you wanted to do this, you could do that too. Definitely up to you, but it doesn't matter too much in this case. So now I'm just going rogue. I did a slip stitch to the slip stitch, and now I'm going to slip stitch into the first chain 1 space. Any way that you want to kind of fasten off and secure your project, as long as it looks relatively neat and clean, it should be fine. So now we are done with the green colored yarn, so I'm just going to snip that off and leave long enough tail just to kind of fasten off and weave in this end and make sure that it's nice and secure. This is my yarn tail from when we started, so I was able to tuck it under all of these stitches here, and you can see it's just sticking out a little bit, so I'm going to snip that off. And now we have basically the base of our wreath. So you could weave this end in and stop here, and you could have a cute little zigzag scrunchie. But for the wreath itself, what we're going to do next is cut a small piece of red yarn, maybe about like 6 to 10 inches long, or just depending on your bow. If you want a bigger bow, you can cut a longer piece. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my crochet hook. You could use your hook or you could use a yarn needle if you prefer, but I think it is a little bit simpler to just use your hook and just stick it through one of these stitches and pull the red yarn through to the front. So you want to go back to front and then move over about 2 stitches. So 1, 2, stick your hook through that one and pull the other end of the red yarn through that. Okay, so now we've basically woven our red yarn from back to front through 2 of these stitches. So here's what the back looks like. So it's just running through from back to front just like that. So now I'm going to weave in my green end so that it is not getting in the way. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to get our red piece of yarn and we're going to just tie a knot. So just place one over the other and pull it through the loop and just tie a knot. And then we'll just tie a bow. So now we have a bow. Just make sure that you like how it looks. I like to just even it out a bit. Make sure that both sides, both of the loops are similar sizes to each other. And that the tails are the same length as well. So I feel like I'm pretty happy with how that bow is looking. So now if you want, you can just trim your ends a little bit. This one's still a little bit longer. All right, and then we're just going to get a small piece of twine and cut a length that's long enough for the loop that you want. So once again, probably like 6 to 10 inches, depending how big or small you want it to be. So for this step, you could use a smaller crochet hook or your yarn needle. I'm going to use a yarn needle and just thread the twine through that. And then we're just going to weave it through 2 or 3 of these stitches at the top, kind of in the same spot as the bow. Once it's woven through, you could take it off the needle, and then I like to make sure that these 2 ends are relatively even, and then tie a knot so that it's a little bit neater behind the top of the wreath here. And then what you're going to do is just bring these two ends together at the top here and hold them together. I like to put my middle finger here and loop them both under themselves. So we're making a loop here, and then just pull the two ends through as you remove your middle finger. Just like that. And then just pull that tight to form that loop. And then at the end, you can just kind of adjust it a little bit until you get that circular shape for the wreath. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial for crocheting this zigzag Christmas wreath ornament. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more crochet tutorials. Thank you.